Dream a little dream of me. Welcome Kindreds, it's Jessica the Story Witch, and this is a video in the 31 Days of Tarot series I'm taking part in. I will link the prompts and Ethany's original video about how to take part, so if you'd like to, you can join in. This video is going to be talking about tarot and astrology and the big three, which is the sun sign, the moon sign and the rising sign, which often kind of gives you that essence of a person. And I thought this was a really cool question, so I was kind of thinking about what I was going to say, and I was like, I have lots of things I want to say, and this is going to be something that I will come back to later on this year, because I'm going to be making a Astrology for Witches series this year, and using tarot and astrology together is something that I'm really interested in. And so yeah, it's going to be something I'm going to come back to, so that this video isn't like an hour long. So this is going to be a bit more like personal about my connection to the cards that are relevant for my sun sign, rising sign and moon sign, and just I'll try to rein in the more general thoughts a little bit. I'll try, no promises made. So the correspondences that we mostly use now for tarot and astrology come from the Golden Dawn movement, you know, a la the kind of 19th century, early 20th century occultists, and that kind of maps astrology onto the tarot, which is something that hadn't really been done before then in any kind of consistent way, but now it is very much kind of built into the system, and you will see it in the more kind of, I was going to say traditional decks, but not in the traditional decks, like as in the pip decks or the kind of more Italian decks that would have become before that. But since Golden Dawn, you know, with Aleister Crowley's deck and with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, most definitely you will see the astrological correspondences coming into play. And you can buy decks now that are, in fact I probably should have grabbed that, but I didn't. I have the Celestial Tarot deck, which is a even more explicit kind of overlaying of tarot and astrology, and there's other decks as well, I'm sure, and that do this. I know they are the decks which kind of are more explicitly linking the two together. I've just grabbed my Rider-Waite to use as a kind of demo for these today, and I will stop babbling now and actually get into telling you about my big three. So my sun is in Gemini, and so that makes the association for me this card, the Lovers. I'll try and show it a bit more. There we go. So this is kind of like I think it's the Illuminated Rider-Waite, this one is called, so the colours are kind of a little bit bright, but I like that because I find the symbolism of the colour in this deck is really important, and somehow I find it kind of almost smacks you in the face a little bit, which can be helpful to really pick out those kind of colour correspondences. So, you know, you've got the two people, you know, typically a man and a woman, and the angel above, you know, and there's lots of stuff written about who these people are, and you know, you can see the symbolism, the kind of Garden of Eden symbolism there. We've got the trees and the serpent coiled around the tree, and that kind of, you know, there's a lot in this card, but ultimately most often when it comes out in a reading, it is to do with kind of choices, sometimes to do with relationship choices, but more often I find with just kind of choices in general. And I find it does overlap quite often with the Two of Swords card as well. So people give Geminis a hard time, you know, they talk about the twins, because sometimes it'll just be two brothers usually, or to, you know, if you're going back to the kind of Castor and Pollux Gemini story, or, you know, there's a lot of history of twin brothers, even in the Bible especially as well. You know, it's that kind of, it's a split almost. It's when something is no longer one thing, and now it's like, oh, and a two is a difficult energy in tarot. It, you know, from a numerology point of view, it's like it wants to pull away, whereas three is much more harmonious. It can kind of dance around together, but two is like it's like people give Geminis a hard time because they say, you know, they always want more than one of things, and they can't make up their mind, and they kind of flip from one thing to another thing. And that is somewhat true for me, but the deeper essence of it is that it's almost like a kind of childlike innocence, which I feel does play into that Adam and Eve. It is that wanting to know things, but also in an innocent way, like, wow, look at that. Wow, look at that. You know, Geminis are quite a young sign. They're early on in the zodiac, and we are we are we are children, and we are innocent, and we are joyful, and we want to experience things with our hearts and with our bodies, and we want to know things. You know, we want to eat that fruit and find out the knowledge. We don't necessarily want the consequences. So yeah, I do feel like that is an appropriate card for me, although sometimes, you know, kind of stereotypical depictions of the Lovers card can be a little bit more focused on like male-female polarity relationships, which is something that definitely does not resonate with me. I feel much more comfortable with it being a spectrum rather than a polarity kind of thing that is going on. So I do feel like there are more possibilities, and I think that some of the newer decks that we're getting now often allow for that much more than perhaps, you know, that you get in a slightly more traditional deck, or traditional from the kind of Hermetic traditions. So that's my sun sign. And then my moon is in Taurus, which is from the same kind of Golden Dawn perspective, would be the Hierophant. And I hated that for a long time. And I'm going to talk about this card in one of the misunderstood cards in the tarot video as well, as part of this 31 Days of Tarot, which is coming in like in a few days or something. And because the Hierophant for me, just, it always felt like, you know, like, look at that. It's like these two monks, and they're just kind of there looking up to this, all males on this depiction of the card, and it is like deference, and almost like, to me it felt like a blind deference to authority. It was like, it was a kind of, you should be a sheep. You should find a teacher and follow that teacher and listen to their teaching and absorb their teachings and do what they say. And because I was identifying with these people, you know, with the people who were there listening. But there is much more to this card, and, you know, that you also have the possibility of being the teacher. But that wasn't necessarily something that I resonated with either. I just felt like it represented authority, and it represented a kind of stuck in the mud kind of worldview, you know, Taurus being a fixed sign and an earth sign. It can be kind of quite cautious. It is the bull, you know, it takes a long time to change its mind. It is the oak tree with the big deep rooted oats, you know, it does not change quickly. And I very much resisted that, and very much resisted this card. And it wasn't until I became a mother and my relationship to that kind of solid, grounded earthiness changed, that I felt more at peace with this card. And I also felt uncomfortable with the notion of being this teacher, and I think lots of people have that as well, you know, with sharing teachings and possibly having people kind of looking up to you and hanging on your words, because I don't want that, you know. No, I love that people interact with what I share, like here on my channel, or, you know, in other things that I share in person circles and stuff like that. But I never want it to be in a way of like, here I am doling out the information and you must lap it up and do. It's not that, and it's that the hierarchy, you know, and we get the same root, Hierophant, hierarchy. It's that kind of structure that I objected to in this card. And when I tapped into that kind of mother rooted energy. I began to see that card in a different way, and that is something that I will talk about in the Hierophant video, though maybe I should have just done it here being as I almost am anyway. But when you think about the ruler of that card, the ruler of Taurus is Venus, and you know, that is the Empress, which is something again that I would have been very resistant to pre-motherhood, but then I was very much more on board with after that. And so, you know, you can see there are some overlaps with those cards, and there are also some very stark differences. So, you know, we've got the very inside man-made kind of environment of the Hierophant, and then the natural environment of the Empress. But you have got the red, you know, which is often a kind of symbolism of that kind of vitality and life force that is echoed in here. And you have the flowers are still kind of there on the robes of the monks. You know, there is, it's not as kind of austere as it looks in this card. So yeah, that is something that my Taurus moon was something. And I used to, when I first started doing astrology, and you had to kind of work it all out from ephemeris and things like that, I used to kind of nudge it a little bit and try and get it so that my moon and my sun were both Gemini, because that just felt so much more easy to me. But now I'm very, very glad to have that rootedness of my Taurus moon going on. And then my rising sign, which is also ruled by Venus, but it is Venus in her more kind of civilized, less kind of earthy, sexy aspect, and her more kind of civilized and cultured aspect, is Justice, because my rising sign is a Libra. And, you know, I don't have to kind of, you can see straight away the similarities between those two cards. You've got, again, the pillars, you've got the red robes, but somehow Justice has got a little bit, it felt a little bit more accessible to me somehow, even though, you know, I feel like it does tie the three of those things in together, because with the Lovers you've got that choice, and with Justice, you know, it is almost making that choice on behalf of a larger community, which can be very difficult. But fairness is something that is very important to me, as is sticking up for people who perhaps are unable to do that for themselves. And so that energy, that rising energy, that Justice card does resonate with me, and always has kind of resonated with me. I think with them being, with my sun and my rising both being in air signs, with Libra being the cardinal air sign, the kind of where it all starts off, and then Gemini being the more mutable, changeable air sign, that does feel, it feels like a good place for me. So yeah, I do feel like, because that was the question, let me read what was the actual question. It says, I find it. From the major arcana cards, what card correlates to your sun, moon and rising sign? How has that resonated or played out in your life? And the question's been sent in by Nia Thrice. So yeah, I feel like I have answered that really. I do feel like it has played out in my life, and it is still playing out in my life, and my relationship with those kind of archetypes does change and evolve. But I really do feel like learning about those archetypes and knowing more and kind of probing more deeply, especially in Rachel Pollack's book 78 Degrees of Wisdom. And to be honest, with every new tarot deck that I work with, I look at those cards and I read what the book has to say about those cards, so that I kind of dive into the imagery that is present and also into the words, and that almost like uncovers new possibilities of meaning within each of those archetypes as well. So I've kind of chosen to show a very kind of old-fashioned, I suppose. You know, there's a lot more choice now of decks, so not everyone chooses to use Rider-Waite-Smith decks or anything like that now. But I find when I want to talk about the archetypes like that, especially in relation to astrology, I feel like they they have so much of that symbolism built into that deck that I feel like that is a good place to, if you're interested in kind of connecting with the astrological connections within the tarot, I feel like using a deck which definitely has that built in is interesting. And then, you know, you can run with it and you can look at what other people have done with those, with that symbolism, you know. So it's kind of inherently embedded in the archetypes, so even when people haven't consciously included it, I find that there is possibility to read those interpretations in for sure. So anyway, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Warmest blessings, and I will see you very soon.